ST, want to say thank you so much for your time and energy being on the podcast. It's really exciting talking about your book. Really hope it's going well. And everyone, please go check it out. I think it's a phenomenal book, and I'm excited for everyone to take a look at it. Cheers. Sweet, man. So, what inspired you to start writing your book?
What inspired me to start writing my book? I would say I was someone who was very introspective when I was young and very creative in my own head. So I would say the reason why I wanted to write a book was just because I wanted to just get I just felt like I wanted to write something down, like release my inner thoughts from my head and just put it down on a piece of paper. And so I said, you know what? That's kind of how that kind of led me to, writing.
Nice. And when you're saying introspective, like what does that mean?
It's
Because
like
I,
it's like my brain is very active. I just think a lot. I don't
okay.
really sit down and I sit down and I just, have my brain just go through a lot of like scenes going on in my head, if you're imagining things.
Right. Right. And so when you're writing the story of your character, because I remember talking about this and how you based it in a certain town, like which town was it that it was based in?
Uh, I would say which, so I've written two books and
The one you just released.
the one I just released, Pineville. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I spent like 4 months living in the state of Ohio.
Hmm.
And I've just like traversed half the town, like going through these small towns and see what they're like. And so that was like my real inspiration in terms of how I wanted to base the setting on. So that was one. And
Mm.
you said about characters, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, regarding the characters, the main character Noah Lieberman is someone, and it's a bit inspired by me, but also not. It's also inspired by people I wish to aspire to be. That's
Oh,
kind of
wow.
It's not someone, sorry.
No, go ahead. What were you saying?
No, it was not someone who just came out of the woodwork. It was like, okay, there's a lot of me that is inside that character, but at the same time, there's a bit of like this aspirational side of me that is just thrown into the character so that I can just aspire to that as well.
Mm. Nice. And who were some of the main people that helped guide this character to be the way they are?
I would say, when I wrote my dedication, it was friends, family, like fellow entrepreneurs, community leaders, and other very inspiring people out there that just made me want to, put that character, give that character almost every element of that world that I was very inspired by.
Wow. And so what were some of the character traits that they had that you wanted in your character?
I would say daring is one.
Hmm.
Like very, I'm a guy who thinks, and I'm a guy who just who's very good at imagining things. Noah is very good at executing things.
Mm.
And sometimes it's like, that's not like Noah's out there, like he has nothing to lose. He's a guy out there, nothing to lose. And that's not like me in a nutshell. It's just, that's like what I want to be. It's like, I have nothing. I want to be that person who has nothing to lose. Like, I want to
Mm.
make things happen, become successful. So it's just like the character is just embodying that. And also he got his girlfriend right during high school, which I couldn't do. So,
Mm. And why daring? Like what about daring made you want that characteristic? Like why that one in particular? I know you
like,
said it was because you have like a more creative, imaginative side, and like he's kind of embodying something in particular. But like tell me more about that.
I'm let's say, for example, if you're someone who wants to get a business started, or you got this podcast started going, some people some people freeze. They just don't want to do it. They feel like the burden of it is a lot big, and others are out there they're like, I just don't, I don't care. I just want to do it.
Mm.
And Noah kind of resembles that. I mean, I mean, if you notice in the book, the first book, it's Havensbury, where
Hmm.
like Noah meets up with a homeless guy. Because, that was inspired by my experience meeting up with someone who was homeless back in
Hmm.
Massachusetts.
Hmm.
I went to college there, so that's why I decided to make it like a setting in Massachusetts. And
Hmm.
that homeless person just like walked into me out of nowhere, and then he just started talking about his life in a
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
And that kind of gave me an idea of how I wanted to just maybe give homage to that guy,
Hmm. Interesting.
wherever he is these days. But
Yeah, totally. How long did it
yeah.
take you to write the book? For the first one and the second one?
So the first one I wrote this in like 2019.
Okay.
And the second one, it took me a year and a half to just write, just be able to write it out because that was my first book that I've actually written out,
Hmm.
like fully. I've
Hmm.
written other like manuscripts, but that was not those were not ready to be marketed yet. So I felt like this is more like releasing my true self into the book. So
Hmm.
whatever wisdom and life experience I've had prior to when I wrote the book is all embedded in that in one
Hmm.
way. And also
And
his
wait, and
spirit.
sorry for clarification, are you talking about the first book or the second book?
Oh yeah, let me start with the first book before I go on to the second book.
Okay.
So first book was, I had three movies that I loved watching when I was young.
Yep.
So which is Dead Poet Society, Good Will Hunting.
Hmm.
And so that's what there's a slogan that says Dead Poet Society meets Good Will Hunting. What and also have you heard of the movie Scent of a Woman with Al Pacino?
Hmm. Maybe.
I think there's this famous scene where Al Pacino at the end just goes out and makes this very daring speech and
Okay.
where he defends his guy from being when he was about to be kicked out of school.
Okay.
So I kind of wanted that scene in that book where it's
Oh,
like
wow.
there's the homeless guy vouches for the main character Noah when he's about to be kicked out of school.
Oh my gosh. That's cool.
So it's a mixture of like those three elements, like Good Will Hunting. He has a like the main character has a support has a mentor and a support system.
Hmm.
And so Dead Poet Society, it takes place in a prep school like setting.
Hmm.
And from those two movies, those two stories, I just said, you know what? Because I wanted that. There's a bit of me that I wished I wanted to go to prep school. I couldn't go to prep school. I wish I wanted to be in that. I wish I could have a mentor that could work with me. I
Hmm.
didn't have that yet back then. So it's like as I was saying with all these different elements of why I wish I could be like Noah. It's just because all these things that couldn't happen to me. So whatever happened to whatever couldn't happen to me, I just made it like real in the story.
Mm. Okay. Okay. That's cool. That's
So
cool.
it takes place in Massachusetts in a prep school setting, but then there's like two dichotomous like places that are at odds with each other. Like one is a prep school setting, and the other one is like a small town setting.
Okay.
They're right next to each other. They're like compete. They're at odds with each other, as they say.
Mm. Okay. So like in the first book and the second book are positioned in the same type of place or location.
First book takes place in prep school
Okay.
in Massachusetts. The second book takes place in Ohio, like Western Ohio.
Mm. Okay.
And as I'm like earlier, I mentioned that I was doing some trips around Ohio trying to get the idea of a small town. And
Hmm.
then that small town, it's like, if you see nowadays what like how small town America is going through some really bad change, like going through changes which aren't really great.
Hmm.
You have you have a lot of corporate takeover of certain towns. Like, if you see a lot of if you go to any small town in America now, you see a lot of chains and not many local
Of
local
course.
eateries, like local stuff, like local markets, local like community even.
Yeah.
It's like you just have a bunch of chain places. It's just so I based that setting this for the second book where the main character, he becomes he ends up he becomes successful in the first book as a successful businessman. And that ends the first book, but in the second book that's where he starts going through a rough patch where all his businesses fail, he's under legal trouble.
Hmm.
And from all that stuff, he just goes from he goes back to his parents' home. So this was like resembling how life was during COVID,
Hmm.
where everyone's lives have been downgraded back to their parents' house.
Hmm.
And that's the same thing happened to me as well. It's like my
Hmm.
life got downgraded back. So I kind of had that same thing back written onto Noah.
Mm.
Like Noah faced a setback, his wife leaves him, and blah blah blah, all that stuff. And then
Okay.
he goes to he just when he gets a he gets an email from a local resident who is very close to the homeless mentor he had in the first book,
Okay.
and he gets him to go to the small town in Ohio. It's a fictional town. It's not a real town. He has him go to a small town in Ohio, which is right next to another town that is run by a large corporate campus.
Mm.
If you're familiar with how Google works,
Hmm.
they and Amazon, they have these large corporate campuses and where they're at. It's just like it's a completely different world from like very detached from just regular way of living
Mm.
outside. So I just had to create a scenario where you had one element where this one town where it's like this very Rust Belty deprived town that had
Hmm.
once had a factory. That factory closed down. That was like one of the few sources of employment for the locals.
Hmm.
That closes down, the place gets outsourced. But then when another corporate town moves in, they just start imposing their own way of their own way of laws that are
Mm.
about to be taken over by the small town.
Hmm.
Sorry, that is about it, that they're about to take over the small town with those ideals and those values, which are
Mm.
very antithetical. And now the main character, like now Noah has to be the one fighting between these two again.
Mm. Okay.
And
Okay.
then I know from becoming a businessman, he becomes a community leader.
Wow. That's awesome.
So now he has to be the one fighting the large town. And also another fact is that the uh, the antagonist for the first book and the second book are the same people, but with different circumstances.
Mm.
So that's kind of where it ended up at. So I wrote the second book I started writing the second book last year in July. Got it completed. I got it published a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
So it was a much faster process because I knew how the whole publishing game works. But when I that where I've learned from the first book now, it's been very easily implemented for the second book.
Oh, cool. That's cool. And I know we were talking earlier about this homeless person and how it reflected in the movie. And if I'm not mistaken, you said you met a homeless man as well, right? Like there was a
Yeah,
what?
he was not a mentor, but he was just like someone who just talked about himself and gave some life wisdom.
Okay. Okay. And so I'm curious, like, because it's being brought up in the book, you have it in your own life, and then this is also referencing to the movies as well that you saw, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, out of those three, which one kind of had, would you say, the most influence to create that character in your book?
Um, that's a good question. It's just like the character, it comes from me, but the settings
Mhm.
come from the movies.
The settings come from the movies, and then you just happen to experience it in real life as well.
It's and a bit of experience in real life. I mean,
Okay.
the character traits are like Noah is a very individualistic guy,
Okay.
like myself,
Hmm.
and he's someone who is very determined to make. I mean, even he was not a good student back before he went to that prep school.
Okay.
I was not a great student during like middle school and like early high school.
Mm.
So it's a lot of circumstance. A lot of I just don't want to disclose too many disclose a lot of stories, but it's just no, it's some like whatever happened. You just have to read the book where Noah was dealing with some rough, like, his grades fell down.
Mm.
He was never a great student.
Okay.
That kind of enforced him, and then to enforce his parents to send him to prep school.
Mm. I see. So it's because of the grades and his performance that causes this transition.
It caused the transition, and also along with getting into fights.
Okay. Okay.
And another element is that Noah does there's a bit of a circumstance where Noah was a great student the first 2 years of elementary school, or I
Hmm.
think first or second, yeah. And then his parents shift base from New York to North Carolina.
Mm.
And then when they go back to New York, it's like the feeling is never not the same, and that kind of changes his way of doing things.
Hmm. 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 Wow. And out of that time of like being transitioned over to prep school and like going through these transitions of fighting and stuff like that, like how much do you feel like you reflected with the character in that way?
I mean, it was just going back in time and reliving certain experiences.
Wow. Okay. Was there one in particular that stood out that made you say, "Oh, I definitely want to put this in the book"?
It's just a little some. I think something I wanted to say, but I feel like it's just too personal to really say it.
Okay, it's fine. It's all
I
good,
mean,
man.
you'll read the book. You may think I just don't want to really talk too much about it, but it's just
Mm.
let the book let that piece of let that piece of the story just tell you more about it.
That's cool, man. I like that. I'm curious to hear about your launch as well. Like you released your first book. How did the release go? Like, did you get onto podcast episodes? Like, what did you do to help
I
the
had,
promotion of your book?
I mean, I've been on several podcasts. I had a team of people, and did some more like brief marketing.
Okay.
And I feel like I feel I need to start getting into more like more avenues to
Mm.
get those books out there.
Oh, cool, cool. How like what kind of person can this book help?
It's just young people, especially young men who are trying to find their way into this world.
Hmm. That's cool, man. I respect that.
Yeah.
I respect that a lot. Cool. And where can people get it?
You can get it on Amazon.
Sweet. Okay.
And yeah, that's the premier site.
Cool. 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 Awesome, man. Well, hey, I'm excited for people to check out your book. Like, is there anything else you'd like to say or share about it?
You'll have a really good a character experience when you read those two books.
That's awesome, man. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else you'd like to share, like maybe where people can reach you or connect with you at?
Yeah, you can connect with me on Instagram, st.tangarala, Tangirala, and then you can connect with me on LinkedIn.
Cool. That sounds great, man. Well, hey, I'm excited to get this podcast episode out there. I think it's really cool that you were able to pull some of your life experiences in this way and share about them in the book. And, I am just curious as a final question, like how much in your writing did this help you grow when you started to write about all this kind of stuff? Like, did you have certain realizations where you're like, oh my gosh, this
I-
make like, mhm.
No, I mean, I feel like there was a lot of regret I had in life.
Okay.
And I felt like whatever regrets I had, I just threw it. It's like there was some internal way of just expressing those regrets.
Okay.
And I can never really say it to a lot of people, but I
Sure.
just had to this is the only avenue where I could really do it. Otherwise
Wow.
I'll be on my deathbed tomorrow and say
Uh,
I was like, I should have done this. I should have done this. I should have done this. Like, you know what? Whatever I wished I could have happened, at least it's somewhere.
there you go. I like that, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm excited for other people to check out the book. I'm excited for people to have other people read it, and I'm happy that we were able to have a conversation on here today, man. This was a lot of fun.
No problem. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Cool.